The sky burned orange and red as the first Drac ships broke through the clouds. Ambassador Tella stood at the window of the High Council building and watched her world begin to die. She was old, even by Villani standards, and her violet skin had faded to a soft purple over the centuries. She had seen many things in her long life. She had never seen war. The Villani were not fighters. They had never been fighters. For 10,000 years, they had built their civilization on art, music, and philosophy. Their cities were gardens. Their weapons were words. They believed that all conflicts could be solved through understanding and patience. They were wrong. The Drac Horde did not want to understand. They did not want to talk. They wanted to consume. The first explosions shook the ground beneath Tella's feet. She grabbed the edge of her desk to steady herself. Through the window, she could see Drac landing craft, descending like dark seeds falling from a poisoned tree. Each craft carried hundreds of warriors. There were thousands of craft. Ambassador, her assistant said, running into the room. His name was Pol, and he was young and terrified. The outer districts are falling. The Drac are killing everyone. We have no soldiers. We have no weapons. What do we do? Tella closed her eyes. What could they do? The Villani had no army. They had guards who carried ceremonial staffs. They had peacekeepers who solved disputes with calm words. Against the Drac Horde, they might as well have been children throwing stones at a storm. Send a message to the Galactic Council, she said. Tell them what is happening. Beg them for help. Pol nodded and ran to the communication station. His fingers moved quickly over the controls. The message went out into the stars, traveling at the speed of light to the great council chambers where the elder species of the galaxy met to discuss important matters. Tella knew it was probably useless. The Galactic Council talked. They debated. They formed committees and wrote reports. By the time they decided to act, her people would be dead. But she had to try. The response came faster than she expected. Within hours, messages began arriving from across the galaxy. Tella read them with growing despair. The Fenari expressed their deep sympathy, but explained that their fleet was needed to protect their own borders. The Crystalline Collective offered thoughts and prayers, but noted that they were a peaceful species who could not engage in violence. The Breen Confederation suggested that the Villani negotiate with the Drac. Perhaps they could offer resources in exchange for peace. Tella wanted to scream. The Drac did not negotiate. They consumed. Every species in the galaxy knew this, but none of them wanted to fight. She read message after message. Each one said the same thing in different words. We are sorry. We cannot help. Good luck. Outside, the screaming had begun. Tella could hear it even through the thick walls of the council building. Her people were dying, and the galaxy was watching and doing nothing. Then a new message arrived. It came from a distant arm of the galaxy, from a region that was marked on all star maps with a warning symbol. The message was short. It was direct. It was unlike anything the Villani had ever received. Message received. Hold your ground. The Terran Marine Corps is en route. Estimated arrival, 47 hours. Tella stared at the words. Terrans, humans, the species that the Galactic Council had quarantined 300 years ago. The species that every other civilization in the galaxy feared. The species that had fought wars so brutal that the Council had decided they were too dangerous to be allowed among the stars. Pol looked over her shoulder and read the message. His face went pale. Ambassador, we cannot accept help from the Terrans. They are monsters. The Council banned them for a reason. The Council banned them because they were afraid, Tella said slowly. But right now, Pol, I am more afraid of the Drac. She walked back to the window. The city was burning now. Great towers that had stood for thousands of years were crumbling into dust. She could see Drac warriors in the streets below, their black armor gleaming as they moved from building to building, killing everything they found. The Villani were not monsters, but perhaps right now They needed monsters of their own. Send a reply, she told Pol. Tell the Terrans we accept their help. Tell them to hurry. Pol hesitated. His hands shook over the communication controls. Ambassador, if we do this, the Council will be angry. They may punish us. Tella turned to look at him. Her old eyes were hard. If we do not do this, there will be no one left to punish. Send the message. Pol sent the message. 47 hours. That was how long they had to survive. Tella looked at the burning city and wondered if it was possible. The Drak were everywhere. They were killing without mercy. The Volani had no way to fight back. But somewhere in the darkness of space, ships were moving. Human ships. Ships filled with soldiers who had been trained for war since the day they were born. Ships that carried weapons the Volani could not imagine. Ships that were coming to help. Tella did not know much about humans. She had read the old reports, the ones that described their terrible wars and their endless capacity for violence. But she had also read other things, smaller things. Stories that the Council tried to hide. Stories about humans protecting the weak. Stories about humans fighting against impossible odds for people they did not know. Stories about humans who would rather die than abandon someone in need. She hoped those stories were true. In the streets below, a young Volani mother clutched her children and ran from a Drak hunting party. The warriors chased her, their bladed arms raised to strike. There was nowhere to run. There was nowhere to hide. Tella turned away from the window. She could not watch. 47 hours. They had to hold on for 47 hours. It seemed impossible. It seemed hopeless. But hope was all they had left. Somewhere in the cold darkness between stars, the humans were coming. And when they arrived, everything would change. Tella sat down at her desk and began to write. If she was going to die, she wanted to leave a record. She wanted future generations to know what had happened here. She wanted them to know that when the Volani cried for help, only one species answered. The monsters came to save them. And perhaps, she thought, that made them something more than monsters. Perhaps it made them heroes. The Galactic Council met in their great chamber, a room built from living crystal that floated in the heart of a dying star. Representatives from 100 species sat in their assigned places, their forms as different as the worlds they came from. Some were tall and thin, some were short and round, some had no bodies at all, existing only as patterns of light. Counselor Bren stood at the center of the chamber. He was a being of pure crystal, his body transparent and filled with slowly moving colors. He had lived for 3,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall, and right now he was afraid. The Volani have made a terrible mistake, he said, his voice ringing through the chamber like a struck bell. They have called upon the Terrans for aid. The chamber erupted in noise. 100 different languages filled the air as species shouted over each other. Some were angry, some were frightened, none were calm. Silence, Bren commanded. The noise faded. We quarantined the Terrans 3 centuries ago for good reason. Their capacity for violence is beyond anything we have ever seen. Their wars killed billions. They turned entire planets into ash. They are not civilized. They are predators wearing the mask of intelligence. A small, furry creature raised one of its many arms. It was Ambassador Kell of the Fenari. What would you have us do, Counselor? The Volani are being slaughtered. None of us were willing to help them. Can we blame them for seeking aid elsewhere? We should have helped them ourselves, another voice said. It came from a being that looked like a cloud of blue smoke, but we did not. We chose to protect ourselves instead. Bren's crystal body flickered with angry red light. The Terrans are more dangerous than the Drak. If we allow them to leave their quarantine, they will not stop with one war. They will spread across the galaxy like a disease. Perhaps, Ambassador Kell said quietly, but the Volani will be alive. The debate continued for hours. In the end, no decision was made. The Council chose to wait and watch. It was what they always did. Far away, on the burning surface of Velen Prime, a young healer named Orin worked in the underground shelters beneath the city. She was small, even for a Volani, with dark violet skin and large silver eyes. Her hands were steady as she treated the wounded, even though her heart was full of fear. The shelters were crowded with refugees, old ones, young ones, families who had fled the destruction above. They huddled together in the dim light, listening to the sounds of battle that filtered down through the stone. Every explosion made them flinch. Every scream made them hold each other tighter. Orin finished wrapping a bandage around a child's burned arm. The child looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Are we going to die?" Orin did not know how to answer. She wanted to say no. She wanted to promise that everything would be all right. But she had never been good at lying. "Help is coming," she said instead. "We just have to hold on." The child's mother pulled her away, whispering thanks that Orin did not feel she deserved. She moved on to the next patient, and the next, and the next. There were so many wounded. Too many. Her brother found her near the back of the shelter. His name was Vel, and he was a scholar who had spent his life studying the histories of other species. He was thin and tired, and his robes were covered in dust and blood. "You should rest," he said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "There is no time to rest." Orin did not stop working. "People are dying. People are dying above us too," Vel said. "The Drac have taken the eastern districts. They are moving toward the center of the city. We have maybe 12 hours before they find these shelters." Orin's hands finally stopped. She looked at her brother with hollow eyes. "Then we will die in 12 hours. "Maybe not." Vel's voice dropped to a whisper. "I heard the council discussing the transmission. The Terrans are coming." Orin felt her blood go cold. Like every Volani, she had been taught about the Terrans since childhood. They were the monsters of the galaxy, the species too violent to be allowed among the stars. They fought wars for pleasure. They killed without remorse. They were everything the Volani were not. "The Terrans will not help us," she said. "They will probably kill us themselves." "You do not know that." Vel pulled a small data tablet from his robes. "I have studied their history, Orin, the real history, not the stories the council tells. Yes, they are violent. Yes, they have fought terrible wars. But they also protect the weak. They fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. There are records, old records that the council tried to destroy. Records of Terrans dying to save species they had never met." Orin took the tablet. The screen showed images she did not understand. Humans in armor, standing in front of fallen aliens. Humans carrying wounded creatures through fire and smoke. Humans fighting against overwhelming odds, not for conquest, but for rescue. "Why would they do this?" she asked. "I do not know," Vel admitted. "It does not make sense. They gain nothing from it. They risk their lives for strangers. It is irrational." Above them, an explosion shook the ceiling. Dust rained down on the refugees. Children cried. Parents tried to comfort them. "When do they arrive?" Orin asked. 40 hours. Maybe less. 40 hours. It seemed like forever. It seemed like no time at all. Orin handed the tablet back to her brother. She looked around the shelter at the hundreds of terrified faces. These were her people, her friends, her family. They were going to die unless something changed. She had spent her whole life believing that violence was wrong, that fighting was the tool of primitives, that civilized beings solved their problems with words and understanding. But words could not stop the Drac. Understanding could not save her people. Maybe, she thought, there was a time when violence was necessary. Maybe there was a time when monsters were needed to fight other monsters. "I hope they come in time," she said quietly. Vel nodded. "So do I." In the darkness of the shelter, the Volani waited. Above them, the Drac continued their slaughter. And somewhere in the cold void between stars, human ships burned through space at impossible speeds, racing toward a world they had never seen to save a people they had never met. Oren closed her eyes and tried to imagine what they would be like. These Terrans, these monsters. She hoped they were everything the stories said. Because right now, monsters were exactly what she needed. The TRNS Unbroken Promise cut through the darkness of space like a blade. It was not a beautiful ship. It was not meant to be beautiful. It was meant to fight, and it did that very well. Its hull was scarred from 100 battles. Its guns were loaded. Its crew was ready. In the main briefing room, 32 Marines stood at attention. They wore no armor yet, just simple uniforms that showed the marks of their rank. Their faces were calm. Their eyes were sharp. They had done this before. They would do it again. Lieutenant Commander Park Jae stood at the front of the room. He was not tall, but he carried himself like a man twice his size. His black hair was cut short, and there was a thin scar running from his left eye to his jaw. He had earned that scar on a world whose name he could no longer remember, fighting an enemy whose species no longer existed. He looked at his Marines, his family, his brothers and sisters in arms. "Listen carefully," he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "In 6 hours, we will reach Velen Prime. The Volani are pacifists. They build gardens, they write poetry. They have never fought a war in their entire history, and right now, the Drak Horde is slaughtering them like animals." He pressed a button on the table. A hologram appeared, showing the planet and the enemy forces surrounding it. The Marines studied it in silence. The Drak have approximately 300,000 warriors on the surface. They have a fleet of 200 warships in orbit. They have been killing the Volani for 2 days now. The Volani have no weapons, no soldiers, no hope. He paused and looked at each Marine in turn. "We are their hope." Sergeant Yuna stepped forward. She was his second in command, a woman with sharp features and sharper eyes. Her record listed her as responsible for the deaths of over 3,000 enemy combatants. She never talked about it. "Sir, we are 32 Marines against 300,000 Drak. That is nearly 10,000 to 1. Jay nodded. "Standard odds." A few Marines smiled. Private Tay, a young man with broad shoulders and an easy grin, laughed out loud. "I was worried it might be difficult this time." "It will be difficult," Jay said, but there was no fear in his voice. "We cannot defeat their entire army. That is not our mission. Our mission is to hold the line until reinforcements arrive. We protect the civilians. We establish a safe zone. We make the Drak pay for every meter of ground in blood." Corporal Hana raised her hand. She was small and quiet, the youngest Marine in the squad, but Jay had seen her fight. She was as deadly as anyone he had ever known. "How long until reinforcements arrive, sir?" "The main fleet is 18 hours behind us. We need to hold for at least that long." 18 hours against 300,000 enemies. With 32 soldiers, the Marines did not complain. They did not protest. They simply nodded and began checking their equipment. Jay watched them with pride. These were his people, the best of humanity. Every one of them had volunteered for this mission. Every one of them knew they might not come back, and not a single one of them cared. "We drop in 6 hours," he said. "Get your gear ready. Get your minds ready, and remember why we fight." The Marines moved to their stations. Armor was checked. Weapons were loaded. Drop pods were prepared. Jay walked among them, speaking quiet words of encouragement. He stopped beside Private Sue, a young man who had joined the Corps just 2 years ago. This would be his first real combat drop. "Nervous?" Jay asked. Sue shook his head. Then he paused and nodded. "A little, sir. I have never fought the Drak before. They die like everyone else," Jay said. "Put enough holes in them, and they stop moving. Just remember your training. Stay with your squad, and do not stop fighting until I tell you to stop." Sue straightened his back. "Yes, sir." Jay moved on. He found Sergeant Yuna near the armory, loading extra ammunition into her pack. "You think we can do this?" she asked without looking up. "I think we have to do this," Jay replied. The Villani called for help. We are the only ones who answered. If we fail, they all die. Yuna finished loading her pack and stood up. Her eyes met his. Then we will not fail. It was not a boast, it was a statement of fact. The hours passed quickly. The ship moved closer to Velen Prime. Through the viewports, the Marines could see the planet growing larger. They could see the fires burning on its surface. They could see the dark shapes of Drak warships circling like vultures. Jay stood in front of his drop pod and put on his armor piece by piece. The armor was old, scratched, and dented from years of use. It had been repaired so many times that almost none of the original parts remained. But it fit him perfectly, like a second skin. He picked up his rifle. It was a simple weapon, heavy and reliable. It had killed more enemies than he could count. Around him, the other Marines climbed into their pods. They sealed their helmets. They checked their systems. They said their silent prayers. The ship's speakers crackled to life. Approaching drop zone. All Marines prepare for deployment. Jay climbed into his pod. The hatch closed around him, sealing him in darkness. He felt the familiar vibration as the pod moved into launch position. All Marines, sound off, he said into his helmet radio. 31 voices answered. 31 confirmations. 31 soldiers ready to fight and die for strangers they had never met. Remember, Jay said, we are Terran Marines. We do not retreat. We do not surrender. We hold the line until the job is done. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. The countdown began. 10 seconds. 9, 8. Jay closed his eyes and thought about the Villani. The peaceful people who had never known war. The people who were about to meet humanity for the first time. He hoped they were ready. 3, 2, 1. The pod launched. Jay was pressed back against his seat as the small craft screamed through space, plunging toward the burning planet below. Behind him, 31 more pods followed. The Marines were coming, and hell was coming with them. The drop pod hit the ground like a hammer. Lieutenant Commander Jay felt the impact shake through his entire body, but his armor absorbed most of the force. Before the dust had settled, he was already moving. The pod's hatch blew open, and he rolled out into the chaos of a dying world. The central plaza of the Villani capital had once been beautiful. Jay could see the remains of delicate fountains and carefully tended gardens. Now it was a wasteland of craters and burning rubble. Bodies lay everywhere. Small, violet-skinned bodies, they had not even tried to run. Around him, more pods crashed into the ground. Marines emerged from the smoke and fire, their armor gleaming, their weapons raised. They moved into formation without needing orders. They had done this before. The Drak noticed them immediately. A wave of black-armored warriors surged across the plaza, their bladed arms raised to kill. There were hundreds of them, then thousands. They moved like insects, fast and coordinated. A swarm of death rolling toward the small group of humans. Jay raised his rifle. Weapons free. The Marines opened fire. The sound was deafening. 32 rifles firing at maximum rate, pouring streams of metal into the advancing horde. Drak warriors fell by the dozens, by the hundreds, but more kept coming, climbing over the bodies of their fallen comrades, driven by a hunger that knew no fear. Private Tay dropped to one knee and anchored his heavy gun. The weapon roared to life, cutting a path of destruction through the enemy ranks. Bodies flew apart. Blood sprayed across the broken stones. "Hold the line," Jay shouted. "Do not let them through." Corporal Hana led a small team to the left flank, where a group of Drak was trying to circle around. She moved with terrible grace, her rifle speaking death with every shot. When the Drak got too close, she switched to her blade. She was small, but she fought like a demon. Sergeant Yuna pushed forward through the center, her squad following close behind. They advanced step by step, forcing the Drak back through sheer firepower and determination. Every meter they gained was paid for in enemy blood. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it was over, the plaza was silent except for the crackling of flames. Drak bodies lay in piles, thousands of them, covering the ground like a carpet of black shells. The Marines stood among them, their armor splashed with alien blood, their weapons hot from constant firing. Casualties? Jay asked. Minor injuries only, Yuna reported. Private Kang took a blade to the shoulder, but he is still combat ready. Jay nodded. Find the civilian shelters, the Vellani said. They were hiding underground. We need to make contact. The Marines spread out, searching the ruined buildings. Corporal Hana found the entrance, first a heavy door, half hidden beneath collapsed stone. She cleared the debris with her armored hands and pulled the door open. Below, in the darkness, hundreds of eyes stared up at her. Hana removed her helmet. Her face was young and human, streaked with sweat and dust. She tried to smile, though she had never been good at smiling. It is safe now, she said in careful, slow words. The translator in her armor converted her speech to the Vellani language. We are here to help. For a long moment, no one moved. The Vellani stared at her with a mixture of terror and hope. They had never seen a human before. They did not know what to expect. Then a young Vellani woman pushed forward through the crowd. She was small, with dark violet skin and large silver eyes that seemed too big for her face. She looked up at Hana with an expression that was difficult to read. You came, she said. You actually came. Hana nodded. We received your message. We came as fast as we could. The young woman's legs seemed to give way beneath her. She would have fallen, but Hana caught her, holding her gently with armored hands that had killed thousands. My name is Oren, the young woman said. I am a healer. There are wounded people here, many of them. Show me, Hana said. Oren led her down into the shelter. The other Marines followed, spreading out to secure the perimeter. Jay stayed at the entrance, watching the sky for signs of more Drak. The shelter was crowded with refugees, old ones and young ones, families huddled together in the dim light. Many were injured, some were dying. Hana moved among them, doing what she could to help. She was not a medic, but all Marines had basic medical training. She treated wounds. She set broken bones. She held the hands of those who were too far gone to save. Oren worked beside her, translating when necessary, guiding her to the most serious cases. The young healer watched the human soldier with growing wonder. This was not what she had expected. This was not the monster she had been taught to fear. Why did you come? Oren asked finally. You do not know us. We have nothing to offer you. Why risk your lives for strangers? Hana paused. She looked at the wounded Vellani child she was treating, at the mother who held the child's hand and cried silent tears. Because you asked, she said simply. Because you needed help, and because someone should. Oren did not understand. It made no sense. It was irrational and foolish and completely alien to everything she knew. And yet, here they were, 32 humans who had crossed the galaxy to fight and die for a species they had never met. Outside the shelter, Lieutenant Commander Jay received a report from the Unbroken Promise. More Drak forces were incoming, a lot more. The enemy warlord had noticed the defeat in the plaza and was sending reinforcements. How many? Jay asked. 5,000 at least, possibly more. Jay looked at his 31 Marines. They were tired. Some were wounded. They had already fought one battle, and now they would have to fight another. Understood, he said. We will hold. He turned to face the direction the Drak would come from. In the distance, he could already see the dark shapes moving through the smoke. Thousands of them. An army? The Marines formed up around the shelter entrance. They checked their weapons. They waited. Sergeant Yuna stood beside Jay. Standard odds, she said. Jay almost smiled. Standard odds. The Drak charged, and the Marines opened fire. The Drak Overmind watched the battle through 1,000 eyes. Its warriors carried tiny cameras that transmitted everything they saw back to the command ship orbiting above the planet. The Overmind saw the plaza. It saw the piles of dead Drac warriors. It saw the small group of armored beings who had killed them. For the first time in its existence, the Overmind felt confused. The Volani were weak. The Volani were prey. Conquering them should have been simple. And yet, these strange creatures had appeared from nowhere and slaughtered 3,000 of its warriors in less than 2 hours. What were they? The Overmind accessed its databases. It searched for records of these armored beings. It found very little. The Galactic Council had hidden most information about them, but it found enough. Terrans, humans, a quarantined species from a distant arm of the galaxy, known for violence, known for aggression, considered too dangerous to be allowed among the stars. The Overmind did not understand fear. It was not programmed to feel such emotions, but it understood caution, and something about these Terrans made it cautious. It ordered 5,000 warriors to the surface, then it ordered 5,000 more. If these humans wanted a fight, it would give them one they could not survive. On the surface, Lieutenant Commander Jay watched the dark wave approaching. The Drakh moved through the ruined city like a flood of shadows, climbing over rubble, pouring through streets, filling every empty space with their bodies. There were so many that the ground seemed to shift and change as they advanced. Defensive positions, Jay ordered. Hold the hill. Do not let them reach the shelters. The Marines had chosen their ground well. A small hill overlooking the shelter entrance gave them a clear field of fire. They had built rough barriers from broken stone and twisted metal. It was not much, but it was something. Private Tay checked his heavy gun. He had burned through half his ammunition in the first battle. He would need to be more careful now. Corporal Hana positioned her squad at the right flank. Private Sue stood beside her, his young face pale but determined. This was his first real battle, and he was trying very hard not to show his fear. Sergeant Yuna took the left flank. She said nothing, but her eyes never left the advancing enemy. Jay stood at the center. He loaded a fresh magazine into his rifle. He had approximately 800 rounds of ammunition. Based on the size of the approaching force, he estimated he would need every single one. They are not going to stop, Yuna said quietly. Neither are we, Jay replied. The Drac charged. The Marines opened fire, and the real battle began. The first hour was chaos. Waves of Drac crashed against the Marine positions again and again. Bodies piled up at the base of the hill. The air filled with the sound of gunfire and the screaming of dying aliens. Private Tay fired his heavy gun until the barrel glowed red, then switched to his rifle while it cooled. Corporal Hana led counterattacks whenever the Drakh threatened to break through, pushing them back with blade and bullet. Sergeant Yuna held the left flank with iron determination, refusing to give a single step. By the third hour, ammunition was running low. Conserve your shots, Jay ordered. Make every bullet count. By the sixth hour, the first Marine fell. Corporal Min took a blade through his armor and went down hard. Private Sue dragged him to safety while the others covered them. Min was alive but badly wounded. He would not fight again today. By the 10th hour, 2 more Marines were down. The Drac had adapted to the human tactics, learning to use cover and attack from multiple angles. They were not intelligent in the way humans were, but they learned quickly. Private Tay's heavy gun finally ran dry. He threw it aside and picked up a rifle from a fallen Drac. It was primitive, but it worked. He kept shooting. By the 14th hour, the Marines were fighting with blades more often than guns. Ammunition was almost gone. The Drac sensed victory and pressed harder. Jay fought at the center of the line, his rifle long since empty, his blade in his hand. He was covered in blood, some of it his own. A Drac warrior lunged at him, and he caught its arm, twisted, and drove his blade through its neck. Another took its place. He killed that one too. Beside him, Sergeant Yuna fought with a cold fury that the Drac had never seen. She moved through them like a dancer, her blades singing through the air. 7 wounds covered her body. She ignored them all. Private Sue, the young Marine who had been so nervous before the drop, fought with the desperation of a cornered animal. He had lost his rifle hours ago. He had lost his blade an hour after that. Now, he fought with his bare hands, using the enhanced strength of his armor to tear Drac apart piece by piece. Corporal Hahn held a collapsed tunnel at the edge of the perimeter, alone, for 3 hours. Drac warriors poured toward him, and he killed them one after another. When his ammunition ran out, he used rocks. When there were no rocks left, he used his fists. The sun set. The sun rose. The battle continued. By the 18th hour, the Marines were exhausted. Half of them were wounded. 3 were dead. But they still held the line. They still protected the shelters. They still refused to break. And then, finally, the sky lit up with fire. The Terran fleet had arrived. Drop pods rained down across the city. Fresh Marines hit the ground running, their weapons blazing. Gunships screamed overhead, pouring destruction into the Drac ranks. Cruisers in orbit began targeting the enemy command ships. Jay watched the reinforcements arrive through exhausted eyes. He had not slept in 24 hours. He had not stopped fighting in 18. His body was broken and bleeding, but they had done it. They had held. He activated his radio. All Marines, stand down. Reinforcements have arrived. We held the line. Around him, his surviving Marines lowered their weapons. Some fell to their knees. Others simply stood and stared at the sky, too tired to move. The Drac assault broke. The enemy warriors scattered and ran, chased by fresh human soldiers. The tide of the battle had finally turned. In the shelter below, Oren heard the change in the sounds of combat. She climbed to the entrance and looked out at the carnage. The hill was covered with Drac bodies. At the top, she could see the Marines, what was left of them, standing among the dead. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. Oren looked at Lieutenant Commander Jay. He was barely standing, held up by nothing but will and stubbornness. But when he saw her watching, he straightened his back and nodded. "The shelters are secure," he said. "Your people are safe." Oren did not know what to say. What words could possibly be enough? So she simply bowed her head and whispered, "Thank you." Jay nodded again. Then his legs gave out, and Sergeant Yuna caught him before he hit the ground. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. The Galactic Council watched through long-range sensors as the battle unfolded. They saw the Terran fleet arrive like a storm of fire. They saw drop pods falling by the hundreds. They saw gunships cutting through Drac formations like knives through paper. They saw the Drac horde, the terror of 100 worlds, running away. Counselor Bren stood at the center of the observation chamber. His crystal body flickered with colors that his species used to express emotion. Right now, those colors were confused and uncertain. "This should not be possible," he said. 32 soldiers held off 10,000 for 18 hours. How? Ambassador Kell of the Fenari studied the tactical data. They did not retreat, not once, even when they ran out of ammunition. Even when half their number fell, they stayed and fought. "Why?" another counselor asked. "They could have escaped. They could have pulled back to a more defensible position. Why stay?" No one had an answer. Bren watched as the Terran Marines evacuated the Villani civilians from the underground shelters. He watched as human soldiers carried wounded aliens on their backs, moving them to safety with surprising gentleness. He watched as a species he had called monsters risked everything to protect strangers. He did not understand. On the surface of Velen Prime, the work of rescue continued. The second wave of Marines secured the city center, while engineers began setting up medical stations and refugee camps. Ships landed with supplies, food, water, medicine, everything the Villani needed to survive. Corporal Hana worked in one of the medical tents. She was not a doctor, but extra hands were needed everywhere. She cleaned wounds, she carried patients, she did whatever was asked of her. Oren found her there, treating a Volani child who had been burned in one of the fires. The child was crying softly, and Hana was trying to calm him with gentle words that her translator converted to Volani. "You are very patient with them," Oren said. Hana looked up. Her face was tired, but her eyes were kind. "They are scared. They have been through something terrible. The least I can do is be gentle." Oren sat down beside her. She had not slept in days, and exhaustion was beginning to take its toll. But she could not rest. There was too much to do. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Hana nodded. "The council taught us that humans are violent, aggressive, dangerous. They said you fight for pleasure, that you enjoy killing. But I have watched you for 2 days now. I have seen you risk your life for my people. I have seen you comfort our children and care for our wounded. I do not understand. Which version is true?" Hana was quiet for a long moment. She finished treating the child's burns and sent him to his mother before answering. "Both," she said finally. "We are violent. We are aggressive. We have fought terrible wars against each other. We have done things that would horrify most species in this galaxy." She paused. "But we are also protective. We care for the weak. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We are complicated. But why?" Oren pressed. "Why come here? Why die for people you have never met?" Hana looked at her with serious eyes. "Because you asked. Because you needed help. And because someone should." Oren shook her head. "That is not a reason. That is just words." "Maybe," Hana smiled slightly, "but words are what drive us. Ideas, beliefs. We believe that when someone cries for help, you answer, even if it is hard, even if it might cost you everything. Because that is what makes us human." Oren tried to understand. In her culture, such behavior made no sense. The Volani protected their families, they protected their communities, but they did not sacrifice themselves for strangers. The risk was too great. The reward was too small. And yet, here were the humans, dying for people they did not know, fighting impossible battles they could not win, and somehow winning anyway. "You are strange creatures," she said. "So we have been told." Hana laughed softly. Above the planet, the Terran fleet moved into attack formation. The Drak warships tried to flee, but they were not fast enough. One by one, they fell to human weapons. Explosions lit up the night sky like new stars being born. In the command ship, Lieutenant Commander Jay had recovered enough to return to duty. His wounds were bandaged, his armor repaired. He looked like death, but he refused to rest. "The Drak flagship is attempting to retreat," his tactical officer reported. "It's heading for deep space." "Intercept it," Jay ordered. "I want that ship destroyed." No Drak leaves this system. The Unbroken Promise surged forward, its engines burning at maximum power. Other ships followed. They caught the Drak flagship at the edge of the system and surrounded it. The Overmind, watching through its cameras, finally understood the emotion that had been bothering it since the battle began. It was fear, pure and simple fear. "They are hailing us," the communications officer said. Jay nodded. On screen, the image of the Overmind appeared a massive creature with 100 eyes and a mouth full of teeth. It was the thing that had ordered the deaths of millions of Volani. The thing that had sent 10,000 warriors to crush 32 Marines. "Why do you fight for them?" the Overmind demanded. Its voice was strange, a chorus of sounds that did not quite form words. "They are nothing, weak, prey. Why do you die for prey?" Jay stared at the monster on his screen. He thought about the Volani children in the shelters. He thought about Oren and her people. He thought about the 3 Marines who had died holding that hill. "Because we choose to," he said simply, "because that is who we are." The Overmind did not understand. It could not understand. Its species consumed the weak. That was the natural order. The strong survived, the weak perished. It was the way of things. "You will regret this," the Overmind hissed. "We will return. We will destroy you. We will consume everything you love. Jay shook his head. No, you will not. He gave the order. The Terran ships opened fire. The Drac flagship burned. The Overmind screamed as its vessel came apart around it. And then there was silence. On the surface of Velen Prime, Orin watched the explosion in the sky. She did not know what it meant. But she saw the human soldiers around her cheering, and she understood that something important had happened. The war was not over. There were still Drac forces on the planet. There would be more battles, more deaths, more pain. But for the first time since the invasion began, Orin felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. She looked at Corporal Hana, who was watching the sky with tired eyes and a small smile. Is it over? Orin asked. Hana turned to her. The Overmind is dead. Their fleet is destroyed. But there is still work to do. We will not leave until your world is free. Why? Orin asked again. She knew the answer. She just wanted to hear it one more time. Hana smiled. Because that is what we do. And for the first time, Orin believed her. 3 weeks after the first Terran drop pods hit the ground, the last Drakh warrior on Velen Prime was killed. The war was over. The Volani were free. The cost had been terrible. Half the planet's cities were destroyed. Millions of Volani had died in the initial invasion. The scars of war would take generations to heal. But they were alive. Their species would survive. And they owed that survival to the strange, violent, impossible creatures who had crossed the galaxy to save them. Lieutenant Commander Jay stood at the edge of what had once been the Central Plaza. The Marines had cleared the bodies and the rubble, turning the space into a gathering ground for the survivors. Thousands of Volani filled the area. Their violet faces turned toward the small group of humans who stood at attention in the center. Only 26 Marines remained from the original 32. 6 had died during the 3 weeks of fighting. Their names had been carved into a memorial stone that now stood at the top of the hill where they had held the line. Jay looked at his Marines. They were battered and scarred. Their armor was dented and burned, but they stood straight and proud, as they had been trained to do. Ambassador Tella walked forward. She moved slowly, she was old, and the stress of the past weeks had taken much from her. But her eyes were clear and her voice was strong. When the Drac came, she said, her words translated for the human soldiers, "We called out into the darkness. We begged for help. We pleaded with every species we knew. And one by one, they refused. They were afraid. They were selfish. They turned away from us in our moment of greatest need." She paused and looked at the Marines. "But you came, strangers from a world we had never seen, a species we had been taught to fear. You crossed the stars to fight for people you did not know. You bled for us. You died for us." Tella's voice trembled slightly. Why? The question hung in the air. Every Volani in the plaza was silent, waiting for the answer. Lieutenant Commander Jay stepped forward. He removed his helmet and held it under his arm. His face was tired, marked by new scars and old grief. But his eyes were steady. "Ambassador," he said, 300 years ago, my people were quarantined. The Galactic Council decided we were too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable. They locked us away and hoped we would be forgotten. He looked out at the crowd of Volani survivors. Maybe they were right. We are violent. We fight wars that other species cannot imagine. We kill each other over ideas and beliefs. We are not perfect. We are not gentle. We are not wise. He paused. But we are also this. When someone calls for help, we answer. When the weak are threatened, we stand between them and the darkness. When everyone else runs away, we run toward the danger. That is what makes us human. Not our violence, not our aggression, but our choice to use those things in defense of others. Jay looked directly at Tella. You asked why we came. The answer is simple. You needed help. We were able to help, so we helped. It is not complicated. It is not strategic. It is just what we do. Tella was silent for a long moment. Tears ran down her aged face, leaving trails of silver on her violet skin. "We called you monsters," she said softly. "We were wrong." She stepped forward and placed her small hand on Jay's armored chest. "You are heroes. You are the best of what any species can be, and we will never forget what you did for us." The plaza erupted in sound. Thousands of Volani voices rose together, calling out thanks and praise in their melodic language. Some sang, some wept. Some simply stood and stared at the humans with wonder in their eyes. Jay stood still and accepted their gratitude with quiet dignity. Behind him, his Marines did the same. They were not comfortable with praise. They had not done this for thanks. But they understood that the Volani needed to express their feelings, and they allowed it. Orin watched from the edge of the crowd. Beside her stood Corporal Hana, who had become something like a friend during the long weeks of fighting and healing. "What happens now?" Orin asked. Hana considered the question. "We will help you rebuild. Engineers and construction crews are already on their way. It will take years, but your cities will rise again. And then we will leave. Your world will be yours again." Orin felt a strange sense of loss at those words. The humans had been here for only 3 weeks, but they had changed everything. Changed her. "Will you come back?" she asked. Hana smiled. "If you ever need us, just call, we will answer." Far away, in the crystal halls of the Galactic Council, a vote was taking place. Counselor Bren stood at the center of the chamber, his body glowing with complex emotions. "We have watched the events on Velen Prime," he said. "We have seen what the Terrans are capable of. We have seen their violence, but we have also seen their sacrifice, their courage, their strange, irrational compassion." He paused. 300 years ago, we quarantined them because we were afraid. Today, I propose we end that quarantine. Not because they are no longer dangerous, but because we were wrong about what that danger means. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in 3 centuries, humanity was free. The news spread across the galaxy. Species that had never heard of humanity began to ask questions. Stories were told. Legends were born. The tale of 32 Marines who had held off 10,000 enemies became something more than history. It became myth. And everywhere, in the quiet corners of a vast and often cruel galaxy, a new hope began to grow. A hope that said, if you are ever lost, if you are ever afraid, if you are ever alone and surrounded by enemies with no hope of survival, call the Terrans. Call the humans. They will come. They will fight. They will die for you if they must. Because that is what they do. On Velen Prime, the memorial to the fallen Marines was completed. 6 names carved in stone, standing forever on the hill where they had held the line. Volani came from across the planet to pay their respects. They left flowers and poems and small tokens of gratitude. Orin visited the memorial every day. She did not know the Marines whose names were carved there. She had never spoken to them, never seen their faces. But she knew what they had done for her people, for her world. One morning, she found Lieutenant Commander Jay standing alone before the stone. He was not in armor, just simple clothes that made him look smaller and more human than she had ever seen him. "You visit often," she said, coming to stand beside him. "They were my people," Jay replied. "My family. I owe them everything. Do you regret coming here?" Jay turned to look at her. His eyes were sad but steady. "No," he said. "I would do it again, 100 times, 1,000 times. That is the burden we carry, that is the price we pay, and we pay it gladly." Orin did not fully understand. Perhaps she never would, but she understood enough. She reached out and took his hand, a small violet hand holding a scarred human one. "Thank you," she said. Jay nodded. "Always." And together, they stood before the memorial as the sun rose over a world that had been saved by monsters who chose to be heroes.